Hey there again. Today we're going to do our recap of the December 2025 month update for the investor relations job market. We posted this deck to LinkedIn on Friday, and today we're recording the talk track. So let's get into the data. And if we look at the health dashboard, we had a good month in that there were 16 opportunities, so we're outside of the range. Calls were outside of the range, and essentially we were at the high end of the range on conversion. So we're calling December a pretty solid month overall. Again, there were a lot of opportunities. We saw movement. We had some interviews, so we're relatively happy. If you look at it, there were 16 total jobs in December, which was down from November, but it made for a very strong fourth quarter. And really, where it came in is that we grew 21% year over year in terms of number one jobs being posted in IR in 2025. So the total was 187 for the year. And the expectation for the year is between 120 and 168. So we were doing very well in terms of opportunities being posted. Now let's look at market structure. And we've gone through some of this in previous decks, but I think the key call out here is referrals won't get you the job, but they will lengthen your time in the funnel. The referral is what helps you stay and get that staying power and get your foot in the door. Without it, it's going to be hard to get through those ATS systems. And the other key is it's applicant overload here. Several years ago, it was just IR people looking for IR jobs. Now it's IR, sell side, buy side, investment banking, institutional salespeople. Everybody under the sun wants to be an IR person. So it's a much tougher environment. Now, in terms of artificial intelligence, the key here is there's two items in your sweet spot you're trying to do. You're trying to get enough high value keywords to beat the ATS, and at the same time drive a narrative that matches the persona sought by the job description. And essentially, what you're trying to do as the job seeker is taking your non-linear experience and then mapping that to the linear pattern that the job description is looking for. So looking at recruiter trends, and I think this is the biggest data point coming out of my December data. In 2020, I had to beat 3,400 people to do a year's worth of interviews, which is about 15 to 20. In 2025, I had to beat 43,000 people or applicants to get the same number of interviews. It's insane. The market is more than 10 times tougher today than it was 5 years ago, but my resume is getting 10 times stronger, which is ironic. And the key here is that the candidate pool is everybody. It's not just IR people, it's the sell side, the buy side, consultants, investment bankers, and institutional salespeople. It is a insanely tough market. So key learnings, the key takeaway here is it's the three T's is what everybody's looking for. Title, tenure, team. Title, does your current title have investor relations? Tenure, do you have minimal movement and long tenure at your places? And team, are you working for a direct competitor or the industry at the company you're targeting? So let's get into the macro trends. And so here we saw some growth here in December. It wasn't as strong as November, but it was still pretty strong relative to the majority of 25. You can see there was a contraction for the majority February to August. Now, when we look at the number one IR market, it was a little choppier because we saw some declines. Overall, there were 16 jobs posted, but that was about 11% decline from last December. Last December was a huge growth year, growth opportunity. So again, a little, mixed December, but we had a very strong fourth quarter to be positive about. And what you're seeing again here is kind of that shift more towards those large and mega cap opportunities. And that shift towards large and mega cap is really also what's driving the tougher market. You've got a more particular HR department, more particular company and who they're looking for. We're up to about 707 jobs that we've tracked throughout the last 3 years, which is roughly 12% of total public companies on the New York and NASDAQ, which is insane when you think about it. That's a lot of turnover. And now what we've done is we're going to get into our competitive yield. And what this shows is by quarter, the average number of applicants we were fighting against, our days to rejection, and then our alpha score. And what you can see in the alpha score, especially in the fourth quarter, is we were doing about 160% better than the market. One is you're with the market. The second quarter, we were underperforming, which was the peak of tariff impacts. And now in the fourth quarter, with the market rebounding, we were outperforming. So we're seeing some uplift with our usage of Gemini in terms of our resume, and we're just seeing our story have some sticky power here in the fourth quarter. Now, in January, it's a little slower. We've got a couple of rejections from lower level roles, but we're excited to see how we do going forward. And what we've thrown on this slide is just these are the best performing applications I had in 2025. And Equinix was the top of the funnel where, I was in the funnel for 98 days, 350 applicants. That got me to about an alpha score of about 14x. Means I'm doing significantly better. The expectation was to be rejected in 5 to 7 days. Now, I had to get a lot of recommendations to get into that funnel and that staying power. Komodo Health, I kind of was able to last longer than I would have expected given the number of applicants. Aon, I had a recommendation, which allowed me to get a larger alpha score there. Booking.com, I think it was more the fact that I had both internet sell side experience and FP&A experience. And then finally at Lockheed, I had worked there 20 years ago. And so I think that gave me some staying power in the funnel. So suffice to say, recommendations help. You never know what's going to keep you in that funnel long. Now, you look at how the market has changed over the last 3 years, and in 2023, it was a very deliberative cycle. It took about 33 days to get to a rejection. The market normalized in 24. Most of them were 20 to 30-day rejection cycles. And now in 25, just a lot of high volatility. We've reduced the time to rejection by 50%, and rejections are quick and brutal. Now, what you can see with our use of Gemini is that in the first half, we only had one role where we were like the strategic finalist, or we did really well. And we had 11 roles in sort of this like we're just getting killed by the ATS. What's interesting is that in the fourth quarter, we saw a 500% improvement on strategic finalist roles and a 73% improvement on beating the ATS or not having these like immediate kill shots from the ATS. Now let's get into the further data. You look at December, again, there were 30 from the lower level ends of the market, and it was probably higher than 30, depending on what data sets you track or combine with us. But that's a 400% increase on a 2-year stack. So it's a very strong month. You look at the data again here, you can kind of see the momentum seems to be ramping as we got into the second half of 25. January seems kind of slow. We'll see how 26 shapes up. Now you look at number one roles, we were down 11%. We were slightly under 18 from a year ago, but we were up 300%, in the 2-year stack. So again, it's still a very strong market. And again, you look at this, we saw a lot of momentum in the fourth quarter. The fourth quarter outperformed any quarter to date in the 3 years of data that we've been tracking. So now we'll look at conversions. And again, for 25, we entered about an 8% conversion rate, which is below our historical norms. The second half was 7.2. The first half was 9.2. And really the key here is the market is 10 times tighter today in 25 than it was in 2020. In 2020, we had to compete with 3,400 applications. Today, we're competing with 43,000. It's just an insanely difficult market. Conversion rate on December alone was about 18.8%. So we had a decent number of interviews. And as you can see, since the election, it's been a very choppy market. It's been inconsistent in terms of getting to an actual conversation. Again, conversations were up. You had a 3 in December. There's the 18.8. And then when we look at the appendix, the question is, what will conversion be in 26? We're below historical norms, but we're still doing relatively well, given that this is mostly internet job postings. So you have an 8% conversion rate. That's insanely high relative to the expectation of about 1%. And to close it all out, when you look at 707 jobs, it's roughly 31% of 2,300 New York Stock Exchange listed companies, about 20% of the NASDAQ. And when you combine the two, which is probably the most legitimate number here, it's about 12%. You're turning over 12% of public company IR roles in a 3-year span. So it's pretty interesting data. If you have questions, please reach out. I hope I can be helpful to you. And thanks for watching.